In the early 70s, when John DeLorean moved from the Pontiac division to the Chevrolet division of General Motors, he discovered a frustrating void in the model lineup of his new department, as Chevrolet did not possess a single representative of the personal luxury coupe class. Whereas DeLorean was the true godfather of the legendary 1969 Pontiac Grand Prix, that very automobile which radically reimagined the concept of the personal luxury coupe thanks to outstanding design and a driver-oriented cockpit. It was precisely the absence of such a representative in the Chevrolet lineup that prompted DeLorean to persistently demand the creation of the first-generation Monte Carlo, which saw the light of day in 1970 and existed until the 1972 model year. And although many designers considered this automobile the most beautiful Monte Carlo of all time, they also expressed dissatisfaction with the fact that the first generation was forced to share many components with other intermediate Chevrolet models like the Chevelle, including the A-pillars, windshield, and various other elements, which significantly limited their creative possibilities and did not allow them to realize the full potential of the concept. However, for the 1973 model year, designers were incredibly enthusiastic, because all intermediate General Motors automobiles were to receive a completely new platform, which opened up a unique chance for Chevrolet specialists to create an entirely new Monte Carlo and embody in metal what they had dreamed of for years. But unfortunately for the artists, 1973, which became the first year for the second-generation Monte Carlo, coincided with the introduction of the 5-mile-per-hour impact standard for the front bumper, which significantly prevented designers from getting exactly the result they had originally counted on. During the development process, many full-size models were created, and on one of them, you can notice that work was being done even before bumper standards came into force, as this model demonstrated elegantly carved fenders in front and two different concepts on different sides of the automobile, with the driver's side featuring a so-called bumper that was actually more of a valance panel, since it could not provide serious protection, curving upward to the point where the headlight was literally cut in half by this element, while on the passenger side the bumper passed under the headlight. And all these proposals featured single-section headlights, which was possibly explained by General Motors' desire to save money on intermediate A-body models, although they would later return to dual headlights. But for 1973, the single-section headlight was the chosen solution. Curiously, this particular concept did not have the so-called chicken wings in front and rear, those large forms and sculptural elements, although a small hint of them was present in front. But as the proposals evolved, the amount of sculptural details on the body sides steadily increased. And now, another full-size model in the design studio demonstrates those very chicken wings and sculpture in front and rear, which was characteristic of that era when General Motors designers, especially Chief Stylist Bill Mitchell, were obsessed with the four-fender look and tried to implement it on numerous company automobiles. Designers in the building knew perfectly well that Mitchell adored the four-fender theme. This romantic, old-school style reminiscent of automobiles from the Golden Era, and the 1971 Eldorado was also supposed to get a similar look, and it would have had an even more pronounced four-fender appearance if the automobile had not been based on the full-size B-body platforms, which were already so wide that further expansion was impossible without installing special marker lights, since the machine already reached 80 inches in width. So the Eldorado got a somewhat muted four-fender form. As for the intermediate A-body automobiles, designers here could afford more sculptural elements and a more pronounced four-fender look. And on this model, you also notice a vertical opera window, unlike the final 1973 Monte Carlo version. And this window is very similar to the one used on the 1971 Eldorado, which, incidentally, was originally designed as a hardtop. But the design leadership changed the appearance of the 1971 Eldorado by adding exactly such an opera window because they wanted to use this design cue on the Monte Carlo and give the Monte Carlo the feeling of a mini Eldorado. There are many similarities between the Eldorado and Monte Carlo, including the vertical opera window, vertical taillights on this particular proposal, very Cadillac-like in spirit, as well as the four-fender theme that the Monte Carlo received, unlike the Eldorado. So much was softened and changed between this proposal and the final version, but again, it contains many elements from the Eldorado, and this was an absolutely deliberate decision by designers who wanted to give Chevrolet a bit of Cadillac luxury at a more accessible price. There was even a full-size model of a proposed four-door Monte Carlo, although a four-door version never appeared in production. But this model demonstrates how it could have looked, with chicken wings in front and rear, while some other intermediate automobiles, like the Cutlass and Regal, as well as the Grand Am, actually received four-door proposals. But the Monte Carlo remained true to the two-door coupe concept. Now let us look at a real automobile, painted in dark red metallic, a 1973 Monte Carlo with approximately 13,000 miles on the odometer, and it is immediately noticeable that the front is similar but different from the concept, with the main difference being the very massive bumper that designers were forced to integrate, although otherwise, they tried to maintain the same theme, and you can see that the grille sort of pours out under the middle section of the bumper, but designers surely wanted this to be a large open section, and if you imagine this without the center bar of the bumper, the grille would really extend from the very top where it is now downward, which would be much more dramatic, but unfortunately, they had to deal with the bumper. The Monte Carlo has notes of Jaguar in the front, with these headlights and surfaces above the headlights. But there are also Cadillac elements in the front with this prow on the hood and the raised section, which is very similar to the Eldorado, and you have the egg crate grille similar to Cadillac and the egg crate texture, since, as those who follow automotive history know, egg crate denotes luxury, for some reason rooted in the automotive culture of that time. Turning to the side, you can see those very chicken wings from the concept present on the final automobile, and one of the features of this Monte Carlo that you will see when we turn to the pure side view is that it looks like it needs a slightly larger wheelbase, and you can see this at this angle, as the distance from the front of the front bumper to the center line of the front wheel seems excessive, and part of the problem here is precisely this bumper. As if the bumper were absent, the proportions would probably look right, and this automobile was designed without the bumper standard in mind, and then it just had to be attached at the last minute to its detriment. Also noticeable is that the automobile has this half-vinyl roof, which was a compromise between designers who almost universally hated vinyl roofs and buyers who liked them, as well as manufacturers who loved them because they did not need to finish the seam between the roof and quarter panel, so here a compromise was reached that gave the automobile a somewhat balding painted front, which was typical of many automobiles of that era. At the rear, there is still a vertical taillight theme, and it is noticeable that here there is similarity to the 1967 to 1970 Eldorado, which started this trend for Cadillac, as there is a V-shaped rear window with a hot wire bend in the middle. Notice how the seam in the vinyl roof aligns with this bend in the rear window, aligns with the crease on the trunk lid, and even with the crease on the bumper, which was very characteristic of General Motors and gave this rear end excellent character. Regarding the wheels, the Chevrolet Rally wheels are just a regular steel wheel with a sombrero-style center cap and then a trim ring around the outer edge. So Chevrolet designers found a way to take their regular steel wheel, dress it up, and make it look good, which was the same as the Pontiac honeycomb wheels, and it looks quite convincing if you do not know how it is actually constructed. Turning to the interior, here is a curious mix of good and bad, as the seats are quite similar to the seats of the previous generation Monte Carlo. The bench seat here is actually quite comfortable. The door panel has a decent-sized armrest with soft material on top. The lower section is just hard plastic. The dashboard and the quality of finish on some of the plastics here are not the best. It is noticeable that the steering wheel was color-keyed for 1973, but some sections of the instrument panel are always black regardless of interior color. And then comes this really fake wood grain, a fairly basic instrument panel with the fuel gauge on the left, speedometer on the right, idiot lights, lots of exposed screws here too, which does not add to the luxury character, but at least this automobile has air conditioning with crotch cooler vents down around the steering column. Moving under the hood, this automobile is equipped with a two-barrel 350 cubic inch V8, and the standard engine produced 145 horsepower. There was an optional 354 version that produced 175 horsepower, and then there was the big block 454 cubic inch that produced 245 net horsepower, and the standard engine really pushes the automobile along surprisingly well, so buyers were very satisfied with their Chevrolet 300s and 50s. Equipped with a turbo-hydromatic 300s and 50s or 400s transmission, some of the best transmissions General Motors ever produced, so at least your Monte Carlo drove very well and provided smooth, comfortable driving. It is interesting to note that the 1973 Monte Carlo was named Motor Trend Car of the Year based on its new styling and emphasis on European-style ride and handling, which was quite unusual recognition for an American automobile of that era. Production of the 1973 Monte Carlo set a new sales record for Chevrolet, with nearly 250,000 units sold for the model year, a huge jump compared to 163,000 in 1972, and the success continued the following year when in 1974, right in the midst of the Arab oil embargo, Chevrolet set a new record with more than 300,000 units sold, which was an astonishing achievement considering the fuel crisis, demonstrating that American buyers still craved personal luxury coupes despite everything. What the 1973 Monte Carlo really hides is its incredible connection to NASCAR, as the Monte Carlo was considered the most suitable Chevrolet model for stock car racing by most NASCAR teams because of its 116-inch wheelbase, which was only 1 inch above NASCAR's minimum requirements at the time, while the two-door Chevelle body had a shorter wheelbase and was therefore excluded from the rules, and the long hood design placed the engine further back in the chassis than most other automobiles for better weight distribution. And thanks to this, the Monte Carlo became Chevy's standard bearer for NASCAR from 1971 to 1989. Winning countless races and championships and becoming a legend on oval tracks throughout America. A rare fact that few people know is that for the 1973 Monte Carlo, an incredible number of color combinations were available, including such exotic metallic shades as dark red metallic, medium blue metallic, midnight bronze, orange flame, and even special custom colors that could be obtained through Chevrolet's special order program, which made each Monte Carlo a potentially unique work of art on wheels, reflecting the owner's personality. And this personalization capability was one of the key reasons the Monte Carlo became so popular among buyers looking for something special. Another little-known aspect is that Chevrolet engineers experimented with various suspension options for the 1973 Monte Carlo, including an optional F41 package that offered improved shock absorbers, stiffer springs, and stabilizer bars, which made the automobile much more sporty in handling compared to the standard soft suspension oriented toward comfort. And this package was especially popular among enthusiasts who wanted to combine the luxury of a personal coupe with more dynamic driving characteristics approaching European handling standards. The fiber optic exterior lighting monitoring system was available as an option for the 1973 Monte Carlo, which was incredibly advanced technology for the early 70s, allowing the driver to see on the dashboard which exterior lights were functioning without getting out of the automobile. And this system used thin fiber optic cables routed from each lamp to a small display on the instrument panel, which was an innovation ahead of its time and presaged the modern electronic monitoring systems we take for granted today. The hidden design history of the 1973 Monte Carlo also includes the fact that original concepts envisioned much more radical lines and forms, including proposals with hidden headlights that were rejected due to concerns about reliability and maintenance costs, as well as proposals with more extreme body curves that were softened to ensure broader appeal and compliance with production constraints. The influence of the 1973 Monte Carlo on the automotive industry was profound and long-term, as its success led to the appearance of an entire wave of competing personal luxury coupes from other manufacturers, including the redesigned Mercury Cougar, Ford Gran Torino Elite, Chrysler Cordoba, and redesigned Dodge Charger, all trying to capture part of the market that the Monte Carlo had so successfully developed. But none of them could surpass the original in sales volumes and cultural influence that the Monte Carlo had on American automotive culture of the 70s.